Well, taking a look at your top story this evening, the ANC is under siege from the ongoing political killings in KwaZulu-Natal. The root of these killings date back to the apartheid government's rule. That's the crux of the argument presented by the provincial chairperson Zikle Zikalala. He was testifying on behalf of the ANC at the Muerane Commission. The commission is currently holding hearings on the ongoing political killings in KwaZulu-Natal. The killings have claimed approximately 100 lives over a period of more than a year. Over the past few months of sitting, the Commission received details of a hit list with the names of politicians in the Umzimkhulu municipality.
We wish to submit to this Commission that the apartheid colonialism has left our country, and certainly more so KwaZulu-Natal, a sad culture of violence. And we have demonstrated throughout on how the culture of violence emerged in the province of KwaZulu. Communities resorted to various means of protecting themselves against the unprovoked aggression from the apartheid regime. This response generated new waves of violence and entrenched the culture of violence in black communities. The institutionalization of violence against the ANC and other liberation movement, and indeed the majority of the people of this country, be understood comprehensively. It is also very critical that the explicit role played by the state security forces or its branches as part of divide and rule strategy be internalized to avoid the altering of fact or cases of selective memory.
Well, joining us on the phone line is Mary de Haas, Violence and Human Rights Monitor and Research Fellow in the School of Law at UKZN. And then also joining us is Professor Becky Zulu, Political Analyst. He will be live on Skype. And then Sabelo Dlamini, NFP General Secretary, is live in studio with us, as well as Walter Lekuleni, PAC Secretary for Publicity, live in studio with us tonight. Well, I'm going to thank my guests for joining us here. Well, just let me start with our phono guest and our Skype guest. Let's ask first, a lot of people have testified so far and said that the political violence has a root in the ANC internal fighting. Just give me your views on that.
Well, it's difficult to say where to start here because I thought we were talking about the evidence from the ANC today. Look, I mean, there is a culture of violence. There's no denying it. It started it's been going on since the 80s, but you can't explain the violence today in terms of what happened over 20 years ago when we have had a new government for over 20 years, which should have been addressing the root causes which lie within the criminal justice system and obviously the development of communities. So, I mean, it's one thing to say, look, it's a culture of violence from apartheid, but it's another thing to say, well, it's the fault of apartheid. It is still happening when there's been 20-odd years to do something about policing, the criminal justice system, and to bring development to communities.
Let me go across to our Skype guest, Becky Zulu, is a political analyst. Just give us your views on what Mary has said, saying that you can't really put the blame on apartheid since it's been 20 years. That is the root of what she is saying. So just to give us your views on that.
No, thank you very much. I think it will be disingenuous to rule apartheid out of the equation. Because most of what we see happening today is basically grounded in our past history. Unless we are disputing the point that was once made by the German historian Volker, who once said that you cannot move forward until you understand your past. So in this case, we are talking about political violence now. Of course, the undertones might be different, the circumstances might be different, but I don't think it will be wise of us to say we are ruling out apartheid entirely. Because the culture of violence, as Zikle Zikalala was saying, is in fact with us, which is exactly one of the reasons why we're even dealing with the issues of racism, ethnicity, and all those kinds of social ills. So basically, apartheid cannot be ruled out, but at the same time, we cannot blame everything on apartheid, having said all have come to light are in fact as a result of our own making currently.
Well, thank you so much. Let's come to studio. Walter Lekuleni from PAC. Let me get your views first on what has been said so far. What do you think is the stance? Do you think it's a culture of violence that has been coming from the apartheid era? Or do you think that it is time to say that this is a problem in KwaZulu-Natal? It's a problem within the ANC. These people are getting killed because of political and power that they want to achieve.
Thanks for inviting me. I think it's both. The culture of violence stemming from apartheid cannot be overlooked. I agree with your guest there. But also the reality is that the criminal justice system has not been overhauled to an extent that it is not able to be dealing with the underlying tones of this violence. But also there's to me, there's the third element, the element of greed, which fuels the need for people to be sitting in positions of power. Therefore, they would do anything to get there. And the only way is to eliminate your opponents permanently, because if you remove the person through a ballot, they might challenge you, and maybe they've got more support than you. So those three elements are actually interlinked. The apartheid created a situation where killing of a person was no longer an issue. You know, it was like in the movies. That's what apartheid gave us as a legacy. But also the criminal justice system does not deal with these matters properly, because if you look at it, how many of those people have been arrested, you know, and how many have been convicted, and of those who are convicted, how many are out on parole? So the whole criminal justice system needs to be overhauled to deal with the issue. But lastly, the issue of greed, where people want to see themselves in the positions of power. Because the culture that has been created is that when you sit as a councillor, you are at the levers of tenders. To me, that's the root cause.
Yeah. Yeah. Sabelo Lamini, also joining us in studio from the NFP. What is your view on the whole situation? Do you agree with Mr. Walter?
Look, before I agree, thank you very much for your time. Before we agree, we have to analyze the situation where people are losing their morale. People must first correct their morale. People should stop blaming the apartheid regime. I was part of apartheid myself. I'm not that young, just that I'm just smart. Look, if you cannot correct yourself and deal with your conscience, you can always blame somebody next to you. First deal with yourself, then again, when we come to the issue of justice system, saying maybe the justice system doesn't do well, doesn't do enough, police doesn't do well, doesn't do enough, money is a problem. Money is everywhere. Money is being created on a daily basis to make people to live. Just people need to clean their conscience. And what I can say can deal with this issue is the commission that will then take a full step to the very issues that have been issued and to deal with those people identified decisively and give them the highest punishment this time. Why I'm saying that? Should you be found, let me make an example, should you be found being the person as a councillor or in the legislature or anywhere nearer where you have to save his people, but you are found wanting to kill the very same people, what are we going to do with you? Because at the end of the day, if anybody challenges you, you've got money, you can kill them. Then the cost of death is very high. People should deal with their conscience, and the highest punishment and the sentence must be leveled up against those people. The commission of inquiry must be sooner or not later be instilled and to come up with all the people should clean themselves if they are not guilty of whatever they said about them. Look, me from the NFP point of view, we've been just getting the cherry on top to say we were able to deal with the the difficult situation where we were not able to get into the elections, but we were able to go over that. We don't need anything of killing coming from the NFP point of view. So we are saying the commission must be there sooner not later to deal with those people. Highest and harsh sentencing should be coming around those people. If more especially they are on power, they are earning money from the government, we cannot allow that, because those are the people that should be servicing people, poor of the poorest. We are here for that.
Definitely. Mary, let's go across to you once more. It is our guest on the phone line. Now, we do know that most of these killings is within the ANC, although there is other parties that are involved. So do you think that the ANC themselves must step in and actually take action to make sure that this kind of political killing doesn't happen again?
Well, look, a couple of things before I answer that question. I'm not denying the fact that the culture of violence really took hold during apartheid, but the violence now is very different than it was during, say, the 80s and 90s, because as you've correctly said, in the last couple of years, most of those killings have been within the ANC itself. And just before I finish answering, I must say I have to ring off in a few minutes because I explained that I could only be on this line for, 10 or 15 minutes. Now, just to get back to your question about the intra-ANC, look, first of all, obviously any party, whether it's the ANC or anybody else, should be laying down the rules about ethical behavior and exercising punitive sanctions against people if they don't comply with those ethical standards. And here it gets back to a lot of the evidence that's already been heard about corruption fueling this violence, and the greed that one of the other panelists mentions, that people are greedy, they want more and more, and that fuels it too. Now, I mean, parties should have control, obviously, of their members and clamp down on corruption. That's the one thing. But the other thing is that don't forget that the ANC controls the government, controls the police, it controls the justice system, and it has controlled those systems since 1994. Now, so they, as government, are culpable for the fact that criminals who kill people, whether it's political reasons or other reasons, are not brought to justice. It is their responsibility, because you will find if you look at reports in the paper about cases in court, for example, you will find that maybe Mrs. X wants to kill her husband, so she finds a hitman with a gun and does it. Or Mr. Y wants to kill his business partner, and he, without any problem, finds the hitman. Now, how can ordinary people find hitmen with guns, and yet the police, crime intelligence, don't know where the guns are? They don't know where the police are. This province is awash with guns. I've been saying a lot of these things for 20-odd years. I've been telling the government this. I've been telling them who the good police are, who the bad police are, and no notice is taken. So they must accept responsibility because they are in government. They're not just a political party who are perhaps not instilling ethical behavior into their followers, but their police, who constitutionally are charged with preventing crime. And this, I can tell you, that is something, the policing in this province has just got worse and worse and worse. And management is dysfunctional. Good police are not deployed as they should be. They're not given resources. They're brutal. They torture people. It's government. Governments are accountable for this. So it goes beyond the party to the fact that the ANC is the government, both in this province and nationally. And then I must reluctantly, I'm afraid, ring off.
No, that's quite okay. Thank you so much for joining us, Mary de Haas, who's from Violence and Human Rights Monitor and a research fellow in the School of Law at UKZN. Well, let's move on to our Skype guest, Professor Becky Zulu. Now, what is your views on what Mary has just said?
No, thank you very much. I think there are a couple of points I would like us to correct before we proceed. First of all, I think it will be incorrect to say that the justice system is in the hands of the ANC. We agree that the ANC currently is the ruling party, and come 2019, we don't know what the ruling party will be. But if we understand the South African Constitution, we'll appreciate the fact that there are three arms of government. We have the executive, we have the judiciary, and then we have the legislative. So unless we are saying that there is no division and those three arms of government do not exist, the justice system is in the hands of the ANC. But as things stand, the justice system is an independent entity, and then government operates as a separate entity, and the executive operates as a separate entity. So I think we just have to clarify that one as a constitutional imperative. That's point number one. And then point number two, if we say that the ANC is government, it's true in the sense that the ANC is leading the government. But currently, we have 13 political parties. There were over 93 political parties that contested the 2014 elections, and 29 of them paid the money that was needed to be deposited to the IEC. And of the 29, only 13 made it to parliament. Then what happened then is that the ANC happened to get the majority, which is why then it is the ruling party. However, the government as it stands is not the ANC government. It is the South African government, which is led by the ANC. So I think that if we are able to spell out those kinds of issues, then we can move smoothly so that we put facts the way they are supposed to be, and then our interpretation then can be subsidiary to the facts. But facts cannot be changed because the constitutional imperative is where we all take a guide from.
Well, thank you so much also for your comments on that. Let's come to studio again, Walter and Sabelo. First of all, let's start with you, Sabelo, this time. Just your views on this. Do you think that we can really blame the police for what has been happening, or put some of the blame on the police or the security agencies for what has been happening in KwaZulu-Natal?
Really, as I started to say, I cannot take this blame and give it to police. If it is a matter of police are involved, it needs to be like maybe one has to come up with something that is talking to police, or maybe indicating even to the people that are coming to the commission to state, if they are stating something about police. Police on daily basis are arresting people. The system, what I call justice system, is dealing with those people. People coming back to the very same society. The society does not tolerate one another. The society is infringed, or maybe themselves, they are infringing themselves with issue of money and me alone. If people can deal with this thing of us, not I, then we can move a step. We can even assist the very same police. As I'm saying, we need to come up with a harsh sentence, more especially if it is found that people who are buying, they are getting money from the government, which is the money for the people, and also buying people to kill people. We need people. We need votes. We need people just to live. It is not a police issue. It is not a justice issue. It is those fewer elements, those individuals. It's just that they are not being found. If they can be clearly found and be dealt with accordingly, harsh sentence, we can deal with this matter once and for all and put it to rest.
Thank you. Walter, your input, I can go through some of the numbers that we have here. The SAP has arrested 25 persons for murder, 10 persons arrested for attempted murder, and so on and so forth. So the police have been doing their jobs. Perhaps it is a factor of not having enough resources for them to fully do their jobs. But what is your view, Walter?
Look, there could be an element of truth in the fact that they don't have enough resources. But for us as the PAC, the question that arises is, why is it that when a policeman or woman gets killed, they are able to arrest the perpetrator very quickly? That to us is surprising. So there is an element of in our understanding, they are dragging their feet. The police themselves must, at some level, are involved. Not necessarily maybe with the killings, but they're involved in diverting attention from the killers. Because I don't understand why a police service that is able to track down criminals that have attacked them, as a police service can't track down criminals who've attacked ordinary people. But the justice system as a whole has a problem. Because if you ask yourself, the issue of the gun control is also an issue. You know, you've got people in this country who own a lot of guns. An individual who has even maybe 500 guns. If you remember the Oscar Pistorius case, where he had more than one gun in himself, and there's this issue of crime, people breaking into houses. Those guns disappear, you know, and they land up in the wrong hands. So it needs a holistic approach where we deal with gun control so that ordinary citizens don't have guns. Only the police and the army have guns, but also the justice system needs to deal with people. You hear them coming up and saying the jails are full, therefore they must go for parole. I'm saying the parole system also needs to come in. So the whole justice system needs to be looked at so that it looks at, because as the PAC we believe that one death is one death too many. You know, no individual deserves to die for his belief. Yeah. That is what we were fighting against the apartheid government, and that is what we're not going to tolerate under this government or under any democratic government, because we're saying a person has to have the right to decide what party they want to support, and they must, even if they are at the highest level of that party, they also have the right to say, no, I don't support this particular individual, and not die for their beliefs. So we condemn that, and we believe that something more should be done to deal with this scourge, because this violence is not only political. There's also criminal violence that is going on in this country. So the police, if they can't deal with the political violence, they're not giving us any evidence to say, well, we're able to deal with the gang violence, we're able to deal with violence against women. If you look at all these kinds of things, it tells you that the justice system is not doing enough for the resources that they have. Maybe they've not got enough resources. Then they should be saying to us, this is the program that we have to deal with crime, but we're not getting enough money. Then we could put pressure on Treasury to give them more money. You know, you get police sitting in a police vehicle under a tree. You know, they're sitting there the whole day. Is that policing? They claim it's visible policing, but sitting under a tree and not patrolling the area is not visible policing according to us. You know, so there is an element also in the management of the police that the Minister of Police needs to deal with, but in also the prosecution is a problem. You know, the investigation, the investigators, some people get arrested, but they walk away because the police can't deal with the evidence. You know, demarcating a crime scene is an issue. You know, the elementary things that you would expect a professional policeman to know. Some of these things become a problem. You know, you come and you witness a crime scene, and the policeman arrives, doesn't know how to secure a crime scene. You know, the forensic department is not properly staffed. The investigations go haywire. You go to the other arm of the justice system at the courts, cases, dockets disappear. So the whole system needs to be overhauled so that you can deal with this sketch.
Now, before we leave, I just want to cover one more part that you have mentioned. Walter has mentioned that greed, most of us have mentioned that greed is a big factor. So let me go to you, Professor Becky. In terms of greed in the ANC and their leader culture, do you think that it might be a problem for them that they are breeding leaders that want money and power and not breeding leaders that actually want to lead the people and be for the people?
No, I think that one is a very valid point. As a matter of fact, it's not just an ANC problem, it's a societal problem. I agree with Sabelo when he says that we have to look at society in general, because even when we're talking about the police that we've been talking about and my colleagues have been talking about, these criminals live among society. They don't live at the police station with the police. So we as society are also equally to blame for this. But then on the issue of greed, of course, there is something called politics of the belly or politics of the stomach. That is exactly what is happening today. What we see with the caliber of leaders we have currently, generally speaking, not necessarily all of them, but the majority of them go into politics not necessarily because they want to serve the nation in the same manner that our forefathers or our forerunners used to do, where they would fight for us without necessarily expecting to get any rewards. The kind of leaders that we have today want to get into positions of power simply because they want to amass wealth at all costs necessary. And therefore, what happens with greed then is that within the ANC, because the ANC is in the majority, the ANC is the ruling party, and therefore you will find a number of ANC members being killed and ANC leaders being killed as compared to other political parties. Not to say that other political parties are not affected, it's just that in terms of numbers, the ANC happens to have more numbers. But this sickness of greed is basically cutting across all political parties. Then, of course, the ANC becomes the main victim because of its numbers. But we have to look at it across all political parties and not necessarily on the ANC, because
we seem to be struggling a bit with our Skype connection there, but that unfortunately is all that we have time for tonight. I'm just thanking my guest, Professor Becky Zulu, a political analyst, and also in studio, Isabella Dlamini, NFP General Secretary, as well as Walter Lekuleni, PAC Secretary for Publicity, joining us in studio and just taking part in our debate on the political killings in KwaZulu-Natal. Well, that's all from myself. Up next is Cindy Mabe with Prime.